Subscribe to Husbandry right now, because the crop we're covering today is not a modern climate resilience experiment or a lab-designed hybrid. It is a grain that carried entire civilizations through famine, flood, and ecological collapse. If you're serious about agricultural history, survival food systems, and understanding what actually worked before global supply chains, this episode matters. What follows is the story and the practical reality of an ancient crop that thrives where others fail, and why dismissing it today is one of modern agriculture's biggest blind spots. This crop is sorghum, and its survival record is unmatched. Cultivated for over 5,000 years across Africa and parts of Asia, sorghum fed societies that lived under wildly unstable conditions. Seasonal flooding, prolonged drought, thin soils, and erratic rainfall were not exceptions. They were normal. Sorghum didn't just survive these pressures, it adapted to them in ways few crops ever have. Sorghum's resilience begins underground, where most modern crops fail first. Its root system grows deep and wide, allowing it to access moisture long after surface water disappears. At the same time, it can tolerate waterlogged soils for short periods, which is why flood-prone regions along African river systems relied on it heavily. Ancient farmers noticed that when maize or wheat collapsed after flooding, sorghum recovered and continued growing once waters receded. What makes sorghum especially valuable is its ability to pause growth without dying. During drought, sorghum enters a survival mode, rolling its leaves to reduce water loss and slowing metabolic activity. When rain returns, growth resumes. This trait is documented in early Ethiopian and Sahelian farming traditions, where farmers expected long dry spells and planted crops that could wait them out. Poor soil was never a barrier to sorghum cultivation. It tolerates low fertility and high salinity far better than most grains. Ancient farmers improved yields through simple practices rather than inputs. Ash from cooking fires was spread lightly across fields. Crop residues were left standing to protect soil. Sorghum didn't demand rich ground. It improved it over time by contributing organic matter through its roots and stalks. Historically, sorghum was planted with intention, not precision. Farmers would broadcast seed at the beginning of the rainy season, often mixing varieties with different maturation times. This meant that even if the weather shifted unexpectedly, at least part of the crop would succeed. That strategy wasn't inefficiency, it was, in fact, insurance. Survival agriculture values consistency over maximum yield. In practical terms, growing sorghum today requires far less intervention than most grains. It prefers warm soil but will germinate under a wide range of conditions. For dry regions, planting slightly deeper encourages strong root development. In flood-prone areas, raised beds or gentle slopes allow excess water to drain while keeping moisture accessible. Harvest flexibility is another reason sorghum endured. Unlike crops that fail if harvest is delayed, sorghum heads can remain on the stalk for extended periods without spoilage. Ancient farmers harvested gradually, cutting heads as needed rather than all at once. This reduced labour pressure and protected food supplies from sudden loss. Sorghum also stored well, which, really mattered in societies without sealed containers or chemical treatments. The grain's hard outer layer actually resists insects and mould, as long as it's kept dry. Some cultures, interestingly, stored entire stalks under cover, threshing the grain only when it was needed. That practice, in fact, minimized exposure and extended shelf life. Beyond grain, sorghum provided multiple uses. Stalks were used for fuel, fencing and roofing. Leaves fed livestock. Even failed grain heads had value. This total plant usefulness made sorghum indispensable in survival economies. Nothing was wasted, and nothing depended on perfect conditions. Modern agriculture often overlooks sorghum because it doesn't fit industrial expectations. It doesn't always produce uniform height. It doesn't respond dramatically to heavy fertilizer. But ancient farmers didn't want fragile abundance. They wanted reliability. Sorghum gave them that year after year. One practical application today is integrating sorghum into marginal land where other crops struggle. Instead of forcing inputs into poor soil, plant sorghum and let it establish biological stability. Another use is as a backup crop. Even small plots can provide grain insurance during extreme weather. The deeper lesson sorghum teaches is that resilience is designed, not engineered. Ancient farmers selected, saved and shared seed that survived real conditions. Over centuries, sorghum became a living archive of environmental adaptation. If you care about agricultural systems that outlast trends and technologies, make sure you're subscribed to Husbandry. Share this episode with anyone thinking about food security, climate resilience, or historical farming wisdom, and help keep this knowledge alive by understanding it, growing it, and passing it on.